Rafael Soares, a ride-sharing driver for 4 years, thought he was just getting another ride on that rainy Thursday night. Driving his meticulously clean white Chevrolet Trax, he had no idea that the plain-looking passenger who would get into his car would completely change the course of his life. In just 15 minutes, one conversation would transform his crushing debts, uncertain future, and shattered self-esteem into something he could never have imagined. What happened inside that car was no coincidence. It was an encounter that would challenge everything Rafael believed about value, opportunity, and second chances. Rafael Soares, 37, had already done 17 races that day. His body ached, his eyes burned with fatigue, but he knew he needed at least 3 more races to reach the goal he had set for himself. It wasn't a matter of choice. It was a matter of survival. With a degree in civil engineering from a respected university, Rafael never imagined he would be here, driving 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, for passengers who barely noticed his existence. 5 years earlier, he had a steady job at a mid-sized construction company, a mortgaged apartment, and plans to marry Carla, his longtime girlfriend. Everything changed when the construction company abruptly went bankrupt amid a corruption scandal. Without warning, without adequate compensation, Rafael found himself unemployed in a saturated market, with apartment payments to pay and a growing sense of failure. After dozens of unsuccessful interviews and almost a year of draining savings, Carla decided she could wait no longer. She ended the relationship and moved on with her life. Forced to sell the apartment at a loss to cover part of the debts, Rafael began living in a small rented room on the outskirts of the city. His only remaining asset was his car, which also became his livelihood when he signed up as a ride-hailing driver. What began as a temporary solution had now lasted 4 years. A civil engineer driving a ride-hailing car, Rafael often thought, bitterly as he shuttled executives to meetings in buildings that people like him had designed. On that particularly difficult Thursday, the rain had been relentless since midday, making traffic even more chaotic. Most passengers got into the car babbling into their phones, completely ignoring his existence, or worse, treating him impatiently when the GPS suggested a longer route to avoid flooding. At 9:38 p.m., exhausted and considering calling it a day, early, Rafael received a notification for a ride in a middle-class residential neighborhood. The destination location indicated an office building in the city's financial center. Odd for that time of day, but not unheard of. Maybe a night shift worker. When he arrived at the pickup point, he saw a woman of about 45 waiting under the small awning of a residential building. She was dressed in simple but well-groomed clothes, jeans, a basic white shirt, and a navy blue blazer that seemed slightly too big for her petite frame. She was carrying only a thin briefcase and a dripping umbrella. She was not the typical person heading to an office building at that hour. "Good evening," she said as she got into the car, her voice calm and polite. "It's raining, isn't it?" "Good evening," Rafael replied automatically. "Yes, it's complicated today. We're going to Avenida Empresarial, 1580, correct?" "Exactly," the woman confirmed, settling into the back seat. "No rush, please. I'd rather get there safely than quickly in this rain." That simple consideration, something rare among usually hurried passengers, made Rafael relax his tense shoulders slightly. He adjusted the GPS, turned the windshield wipers on to maximum speed, and entered the wet night traffic. The first few minutes passed in silence, only the sound of the rain and the occasional GPS alert filling the air. Rafael watched the woman in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window with a contemplative expression, apparently without the typical anxiety of someone who is late for an appointment. "Are you going to work at this time?" Rafael finally asked, more out of professional habit than out of real curiosity. The woman smiled slightly. "Something like that. I have an important meeting." "In the business district? At 10 o'clock at night?" "Sometimes." The best deals happen outside of business hours, she answered enigmatically. Rafael nodded, assuming that she probably worked with international clients or something. She wouldn't be the first modest-looking executive he had transported. And you? How long have you been driving for the app? The woman asked, her tone genuinely interested. 4 years, Rafael replied, surprised by the interest. But that's not my original degree. Really? And what would it be? Civil engineering, he said, a hint of pride mixed with bitterness in his voice. But things didn't work out so well in that area. The woman tilted her head slightly. Civil engineering? Interesting. Construction, structural design, urban planning. A fascinating field. Rafael glanced briefly at the rearview mirror, surprised by the detailed answer. Most people usually responded with a vague, "That's cool," and went back to their cell phones. Yes, it is. Or was, he corrected. I worked for 5 years at Construtora Horizonte before it went bankrupt in 2019. Horizonte, the woman repeated, thoughtfully. The one involved in the Operation Deep Foundation scandal? Rafael almost stopped the car in surprise. Few people remembered the name of that operation that had destroyed not only the construction company, but the careers of dozens of engineers who, like him, had nothing to do with the frauds that had been uncovered. Exactly, he confirmed now, genuinely curious about his passenger. You seem well informed on the subject. I follow the real estate and construction market, she replied simply. And from what I recall, most of Horizonte's employees were competent professionals who ended up paying for the management's mistakes. Rafael felt something strange in his chest, a mix of validation and sadness at hearing someone acknowledge the injustice that had completely altered the course of his life. That's exactly it, he agreed, his voice slightly choked. Suddenly, having Horizonte on your resume became a problem, not a qualification. No one wanted to hire former employees, even though they knew we weren't involved. The woman nodded understandingly. And how did you end up driving? Normally, Rafael would give a short, generic answer, but there was something about this passenger. Perhaps her genuine attention, perhaps her validation of Horizonte, that made him open up more. It was out of necessity at first. I thought it would be temporary, just until I found something in my field. But after hundreds of resumes sent out and dozens of interviews that didn't lead to anything, he shrugged, his eyes fixed on the wet road. 4 years later, I'm still here. And you're still looking for a job as an engineer? Rafael laughed humorlessly. Not anymore. After all this time, my technical skills are outdated. And to be honest, I don't have the confidence I used to. He didn't know why he was sharing so much with a stranger, but there was something liberating about being honest about his situation after years of forced smiles when acquaintances asked about his driving days. I see, the woman said, her voice conveying a genuine empathy that Rafael rarely experienced. What if an opportunity came up today? Would you still be interested in going back to engineering? Rafael considered the question as he dodged a particularly large puddle. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me still loves the profession, but another part of me is afraid to try and fail again. The woman nodded as if she understood his sentiment perfectly. Fear can be paralyzing, she commented, but sometimes second chances come when we least expect them. There was something about the way she said it, not as a cheap motivational cliché, but as a lived truth that made Rafael look at her again in the rearview mirror. Who was that woman anyway? May I ask what area of engineering you specialize in? The woman asked, breaking a brief silence that had settled over. Residential structures and projects, Rafael replied. My final project at university was on low-cost, sustainable housing. I even implemented a prototype in a social project before joining Horizonte. His eyes lit up momentarily as he remembered that project, perhaps the moment of his career of which he was most proud. Low-cost, sustainable housing? That sounds extremely relevant to today, the woman commented, leaning forward slightly. It was my passion, Rafael admitted. I believed we could revolutionize the way we think about affordable housing in Brazil. Not just cheap construction, but decent, energy-efficient homes, adapted to the local climate with alternative materials. He stopped abruptly, noticing her enthusiasm. Sorry, I'm rambling. Not at all, the woman encouraged him. It's inspiring to hear someone speak with such passion. What happened to that project? Rafael sighed. It was shelved. Horizonte was more interested in luxury condominiums and large-scale public works. I periodically tried to revive the idea, but I never got internal support. When the company went bankrupt, I lost all the files and prototypes that were on the servers. You didn't have copies? Some basic plans and notes, nothing complete. He paused. In the first few months after I lost my job, I tried to revive the project on my own. I even presented it to some smaller construction companies, but without seed capital or institutional support, no one took it seriously. The woman made a thoughtful sound. That's a shame. It sounds like exactly the kind of innovation the housing sector needs. I thought so too, Rafael replied, the bitterness returning to his voice. But the market doesn't work that way. Ideas are worthless without the right connections. Or without the right investor, the woman added softly. Rafael shrugged, not wanting to get too deep into another conversation about broken dreams. He had already shared more than he intended. What about you? He asked, trying to change the subject. Do you work in construction? The woman smiled. Let's just say I work with people who build things. I identify talent and opportunities. Recruiter? Rafael guessed. Something like that, she replied in the same enigmatic tone as before. Actually, I'm always looking for people with innovative vision and a genuine passion for solving real problems. Rafael nodded politely, but internally he felt a pang of frustration. Recruiters had gotten into his car before, always full of empty promises to keep your resume in mind when they found out about his background. A silence settled in again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The rain had eased to a light drizzle, and traffic was moving a little better now. The GPS indicated that they would arrive at their destination in approximately 7 minutes. You know, Rafael, the woman said suddenly, as if she had made a decision, I don't believe in coincidences. Of all the people who could have accepted my ride today, it was you. Rafael cast a curious glance in the rearview mirror. What do you mean? Let me be direct, she said, now in a more professional tone. My name is Helena Vasconcelos. I am the CEO of the Nova Terra Foundation. Rafael almost lost control of the steering wheel. The Nova Terra Foundation was one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country, focused on sustainable development and innovative social projects. Even though he was not an engineer, he knew that name. Everyone did. The foundation, he began, unable to finish the sentence. Yes, Helena confirmed. We are starting a new phase of investments in sustainable housing for vulnerable communities, a national project that aims to redefine how we think about social housing in Brazil. Rafael's heart raced. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was exactly the area he had mentioned, the dream he had abandoned. And why are you telling me this? He asked cautiously, afraid of raising expectations. Helena smiled. Because in the last 3 months, we evaluated more than 70 professionals to lead this project. Renowned engineers, award-winning architects, renowned urban planners. None of them had what we were looking for. And what would that be? Exactly what you've demonstrated in the last 10 minutes. Genuine passion, innovative vision, and most importantly, life experience that allows you to truly understand the problem we're trying to solve. Rafael swallowed hard, a mix of hope and skepticism fighting inside him. Was this for real, or some kind of cruel joke? With all due respect, Mrs. Vasconcelos, you barely know me. You've only heard a few minutes of conversation in the back seat of a car. That's true, Helena agreed. but I have 25 years of experience identifying talent and potential. And what I saw in you, the way your eyes lit up when you talked about sustainable housing, how you remained resilient even after losing everything, tells me more than dozens of formal interviews could. Rafael kept his gaze fixed on the road, trying to process what was happening. Part of him wanted to believe, but years of disappointment had built high walls around his hopes. "And what exactly are you proposing?" he finally asked, his voice controlled. "A formal interview for starters," Helena replied, her voice now completely professional. "If you're interested, of course, for the position of Special Projects Coordinator at the Nova Terra Foundation, focused specifically on the Sustainable Housing Program." The GPS announced that they were 2 minutes from their destination. Rafael felt like he was in a strange dream. Of all the races on all the days, for the past 4 years, how could this be happening right now? "Why me?" he asked, the vulnerability evident in his voice. "There are hundreds of engineers who are more qualified, more up-to-date, more connected. And that's exactly why I want you," Helena replied, firmly. "We don't need another professional who is concerned with status or recognition. We need someone who understands, in the core of their being, the importance of creating real solutions for real people." Rafael stopped the car in front of the imposing glass building that housed the headquarters of the Nova Terra Foundation. The lights of the logo on top of the building shone against the now partially clear night sky. "We're here," he announced. Unnecessarily, his mind still processing everything that had happened in the last few minutes. Helena made no move to leave immediately. Instead, she opened her briefcase and took out a business card, which she handed to Rafael. "My direct contact," she said. "Think about my proposal. If you're interested, call me tomorrow to schedule a formal meeting with the team." Rafael took the card with slightly trembling fingers. The Nova Terra Foundation logo was there, along with Helena's name and her title. Helena Vasconcelos, Executive Director. "I'll think about it," was all he could say. Helena smiled understandingly. "That's all I ask." Sometimes, Rafael, fate puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we think we're just driving in circles. She got out of the car, closed the door softly, and walked confidently toward the entrance of the building. Rafael stood still, the card still in his hand, the engine running, as the app notified him that the race was over. This had been, without a doubt, the most extraordinary race of his life. But was it real? And more importantly, would he have the courage to believe again? Rafael woke up the next morning with a strange feeling, as if the previous night had been an elaborate dream. But the business card on the bedside table confirmed that everything had really happened. Sitting on the edge of the bed in his small, rented room, he stared at the card as if it were an alien object. Helena Vasconcelos, Fundação Nova Terra. An opportunity that seemed too good to be true. For years, Rafael had built layers of protection around himself. After so many rejections, he had learned not to create expectations, not to allow himself to dream. It was safer that way, less painful. Picking up the phone and calling that number would mean lowering those defenses, making himself vulnerable again. "What if it's just another disappointment?" he murmured to himself, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. His phone buzzed, with a notification from the ride-hailing app. "Good morning, fellow driver. Ready for another day of racing?" The automated message had never sounded so empty before. This was what his life had become, waking up every day to drive in circles around the city, taking strangers to their destinations while his own seemed ever more distant. Rafael took a quick shower and made a simple coffee. His movements were mechanical, his mind still processing the conversation from the night before. As he ate, he opened his laptop, an old model that had survived the sale of almost all of his possessions, and after a moment of hesitation, typed Fundação Nova Terra into the search bar. The results confirmed everything Helena had said. The foundation was a powerhouse in the sustainable development sector with projects all over the country. Several recent news stories mentioned a new initiative for sustainable, affordable housing, with an investment of millions. Scrolling through the page, he found a photo of Helena at an official event. It was definitely the same woman who had been in his car. CEO of the foundation for 8 years, with previous stints at the World Bank and the Ministry of Cities, an internationally respected figure in the field of sustainable urban development. So it wasn't a joke, Rafael murmured, feeling a mix of relief and growing anxiety. His gaze wandered around the small room, the peeling walls, the window that didn't close completely, the makeshift closet with his few clothes. This had been his world for the past few years, so far removed from the life he had imagined for himself. On impulse, he opened the desk drawer and took out a yellowed folder. Inside were the sketches and notes of his sustainable housing project, preserved despite all the changes and losses. They were hand-drawn drawings, preliminary calculations, ideas scribbled in the margins, fragments of the dream he had abandoned. His fingers traced the lines of a project that had once meant everything to him. He could still remember the feeling of purpose, the certainty that he was creating something that could truly make a difference. The phone beside him felt like it, weighed a ton when he finally picked it up. Helena's card in his other hand, Rafael took a deep breath and dialed the number. A secretary answered, and after Rafael identified himself, there was a brief wait before Helena's now familiar voice came on the line. "Rafael, I'm glad you called," she said, without a trace of surprise, as if she were certain he would. "Good morning, Mrs. Vasconcelos," she replied, her voice more formal than she intended. "I'm calling about the proposal you made to me yesterday." "Helena, please," she corrected gently, "and I'm glad you're interested. Could you come to the foundation today at 2 p.m. so we can talk formally?" Rafael swallowed. "Today? Yes, I can." "Excellent. I'll ask the front desk to be waiting for you. Bring your documents and, if possible, any materials you have from your sustainable housing project." "Even the incomplete sketches?" he asked, looking at the amateur drawings in front of him. "Especially these," Helena replied. "I want to see your ideas in their purest form, before any commercial filter." After hanging up, Rafael stood motionless for several minutes, the phone still in his hand. It was really happening. After years of aimless driving, an opportunity had entered his car on the rainy night. But along with hope came fear, a deep, ingrained fear that somehow everything would go wrong again, that he wouldn't be good enough, that this would be just another disappointment in a life that had already known many. Nevertheless, Rafael turned off the driver app for the first time in 4 years on a weekday. He organized his documents, put his only dress shirt, slightly yellowed from being stored away, in the wash, and spent the morning reviewing his old projects and updating himself on recent trends in sustainable construction. At 1 p.m., dressed as best as his limited resources allowed, Rafael called a car. The irony was not lost on him, and set off for the interview that could change everything. The imposing building of the Nova Terra Foundation looked even more intimidating in the daylight. Its modern and sustainable architectural lines, rainwater harvesting, solar panels, vertical gardens, represented exactly the kind of innovation that Rafael had once dreamed of creating. At the reception, he was greeted by a smiling young woman who, upon hearing his name, immediately became more attentive. "Mr. Soares, we were waiting for you. Dr. Helena asked me to take you directly to the meeting room as soon as you arrived." Rafael was led through elegant but unpretentiously decorated hallways. The walls displayed photos of the Foundation's projects around the country: schools, community centers, hospitals, all built with sustainable principles. The receptionist showed him into a medium-sized meeting room with a large oval table and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Around the table were 5 people, including Helena, who stood up to welcome him. "Rafael, I'm so glad you could come," she said, extending her hand. "Allow me to introduce you to our core team at Project Morada." One by one, Helena introduced those present: the Foundation's Chief Operating Officer, the Sustainability Coordinator, the Special Projects Financial Manager, and a renowned architect Rafael recognized from professional publications. "Please have a seat," Helena gestured to a chair. "Before we formally begin, I'd like everyone to know how we met." To Rafael's surprise, Helena spoke candidly about the ride-hailing job, how impressed she had been by his passion and resilience, and her conviction that he would be perfect for the project. "But obviously," she concluded, "I'm not going to impose my personal opinion on the team. We're here for a full professional evaluation." The next 2 hours were an emotional roller coaster for Rafael. He answered technical questions, discussed engineering concepts he hadn't formally discussed in years, presented his old sketches, and talked about his vision for housing that was simultaneously sustainable, affordable, and dignified. With each answer, he felt his confidence gradually grow. The knowledge was there. The passion had never really disappeared, just been buried under layers of disappointment and day-to-day survival. "Mr. Soares," the COO said at one point, "your technical background is clearly solid, but there's a 4-year gap in your professional practice as an engineer. How do you plan to bridge that?" It was the question Rafael feared most, the embodiment of his greatest insecurity. For a moment, he considered an evasive answer, something about independent study or monitoring the market, but then he decided on total honesty. "I won't deny that there is a gap," he replied, looking directly at the director. "For the past 4 years, I've driven a car around the city while the world of engineering has continued to evolve. There are techniques, software, and regulations that I will need to keep up with." He paused, gathering courage for what he would say next. "But I've also learned things that no engineering office could teach me. I've transported more than 15,000 people from all walks of life, talking to many of them about their lives, their homes, their daily problems. I've seen the city at all times of the day, in all weather conditions. I've seen firsthand how people interact with urban spaces, what their true needs are." His voice grew firmer as he continued. "I've entered communities that many engineers only know about through statistics. I've seen families living in conditions that theoretical projects rarely consider. And, perhaps most importantly, I've learned that losing everything, your career, your home, your relationships, gives you a unique perspective on what really matters in a home." The room fell silent for a few seconds after her answer. Rafael felt butterflies in his stomach, fearing he had said too much, exposing vulnerabilities that should have remained hidden in a professional interview. It was the architect who broke the silence, with a slight smile on her lips. "That's exactly the perspective our team was missing," she said simply. Helena looked around the table, observing everyone's reactions. After a brief moment, she turned to Rafael. "I appreciate your honesty and your participation today. Let's discuss this internally, and we'll be in touch soon." Rafael nodded, understanding that the interview was over. He thanked everyone for the opportunity and was escorted back to reception. In the elevator, alone, he allowed himself to exhale deeply. He had done the best he could. Now all that was left was to wait and hope that it would be enough. Rafael arrived home physically and emotionally exhausted. The interview had drained every ounce of energy he had, forcing him to confront both his deepest hopes and fears. It was almost 5 p.m., and for the first time in years, he had not spent the day driving. It felt strange, as if he had violated some unwritten rule of his new life. He collapsed onto the small, worn couch, letting the folder with his projects fall to the side. He had done everything he could. He had shown his expertise, shared his ideas, exposed his vulnerabilities. Now, the decision was in the hands of Helena and her team. His phone vibrated. For a moment of irrational hope, he thought it might be the foundation, with an immediate response. But it was just the ride-hailing app, with an automated message. "You haven't done any rides yet today. Is everything okay?" Rafael turned off his cell phone. He couldn't handle any more running around that day. His mind was completely occupied, reliving every moment of the interview, analyzing each answer given, imagining what he could have said better. The next few hours passed in a state of growing anxiety. Rafael tried to distract himself. He watched television, tried to read a book he had abandoned for months, even started to organize his small closet. Nothing worked. The wait was torturous. Around 8 p.m., when he had already given up on receiving news that day, his phone rang. An unknown number. With his heart racing, he answered. "Rafael Soares?" "Yes, that's him." "This is Mariana, Dr. Helena Vasconcelos' assistant. The doctor would like to know if you could come to the foundation tomorrow, at 9 a.m. for a final meeting." Rafael felt his mouth go dry. "Final meeting? Does that mean—" "The doctor would prefer to discuss the details in person," the assistant replied politely. "Would that be possible for you?" "Yes, of course. I'll be there." After hanging up, Rafael remained motionless, the phone still in his hand. Final meeting. What did that mean exactly? Was it just a formality to inform him that he had not been selected? Or could it be— No, he shouldn't get his hopes up. He had learned the hard way that hope was often the prelude to disappointment. The night was long, with Rafael alternating between moments of cautious optimism and mental preparation for yet another rejection. He slept poorly, waking up several times with his heart racing after dreams of entering meeting rooms only to find them empty. The next morning he put on his only dress shirt again, now clean but still far from ideal for an executive meeting. He took another ride, the irony still present, and arrived at the Nova Terra Foundation 20 minutes before the scheduled time. This time, he was not led into the conference room, but into Helena's private office. It was a surprisingly modest space for someone in his position. Functional, uncluttered, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. The walls were lined with maps and photographs of projects, as well as a few discreetly framed diplomas and awards. Helena was standing by the window when he entered, watching the city below. She turned with a polite smile, but her face gave nothing away about what was to come. "Rafael, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." He did as he was told, trying to control the anxiety that threatened to show in his posture or expression. Helena sat down across from him, placing a folder on the table between them. There was something different about her demeanor today, a professional formality that contrasted with the more personal approach of the day before. "First, I want to thank you again for participating in the selection process," she began. "After you left yesterday, our team had a long discussion about the Murata project and the profile needed to lead it." Rafael nodded, mentally preparing himself for what was to come. He recognized the tone. It was the polite prelude to rejection. He had heard variations of it dozens of times over the years. "As you can imagine, we have a huge responsibility with this project," Helena continued. "We are talking about an investment of over 30 million in housing that we hope will transform the lives of thousands of families. This is not a decision we take lightly." "I completely understand," Rafael replied, maintaining his composure. Helena watched him for a moment as if considering something. Then she opened the folder in front of her. "Our team carefully reviewed your resume, your interview responses, and your original design sketches," she continued, looking at the documents. "We also talked extensively about the pros and cons of bringing in someone who has been away from the formal practice of engineering for 4 years. Rafael felt his stomach sink. There it was, the mention of the gap in his career, the reason he would be thanked and dismissed. There were legitimate concerns, Helena continued. Questions about technical up-to-dateness, familiarity with recent software, knowledge of the latest sustainable building regulations. Rafael nodded, resigned. It was the same old story, just told more delicately. However, Helena paused meaningfully. We also discussed the unique qualities you would bring to the project. Your life experience, your intimate understanding of people's real needs, your genuine passion for sustainable social housing. She closed the folder and looked Rafael straight in the eye. And so we came to a decision. Rafael caught his breath involuntarily. We would like to offer you the position of Morada Project Coordinator with an initial contract of 2 years. The words hung in the air for a moment, as if Rafael couldn't quite process them. What? Was all he could manage to say. Helena smiled, genuinely this time. We're offering you the job, Rafael. The team was unanimous after your response about how the last 4 years, far from being a void in your career, have provided you with invaluable perspective. Rafael felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Joy, disbelief, fear, relief. Was this real? Was this really happening? But, he began, still in disbelief. What about my technical obsolescence? We've already thought about that, Helena replied, promptly. Your contract will include an initial 2-month period dedicated exclusively to your professional development, intensive courses, workshops with our senior engineers, updated certifications, everything you need to get back on the cutting edge of your field. She pushed another document toward him, a preliminary employment contract. Rafael took it with slightly shaking hands, seeing for the first time the details of the offer, the position, the responsibilities, and the salary. He almost choked. When he saw the number, it was more than he had earned in 3 months as a driver. That's very generous, he murmured, still trying to process everything. It's the market rate for a professional with your qualifications and the responsibility. You will have, Helena replied simply, and it includes a performance bonus tied to the progress and efficiency of the project. Rafael looked at the contract again, quickly reading the main terms. It was everything he had dreamed of and more. Not just a return to engineering, but an opportunity to work on a project that had been his passion since college, with real resources to implement it on a large scale. Why me? He finally asked, the same question he had asked in the car 2 days before. With all the professionals available, why choose someone who has spent the last few years driving? Helena leaned back in her chair, considering the question. You know, Rafael, the Nova Terra Foundation was not created just to build sustainable structures. It was created to transform lives. And to do that effectively, we need people who understand transformation not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. You've experienced what it's like to lose almost everything. You've adapted to circumstances you never imagined for yourself, and yet you've maintained your integrity and passion. These aren't just admirable personal qualities. They're exactly the qualities needed to lead a project that aims to help people rebuild their lives through decent housing. The words struck Rafael deeply. For years he had seen his career as a story of failure. The promising engineer who ended up as a ride-sharing driver. He'd never considered that this same story, seen from another angle, could be his greatest asset. Besides, Helena added with a small smile, your sustainable housing designs are genuinely innovative. Our architect was particularly impressed by your solutions for natural ventilation and rainwater harvesting. She said they were ideas she herself wouldn't have considered. Rafael felt a surge of pride he hadn't experienced in a long time. His ideas, scribbled in stolen moments between driving shifts, had real value. They weren't just pipe dreams. So, Helena concluded, the question now is, do you accept our offer? Rafael looked at the contract in his hands, at the office around him, and finally at Helena, the woman who had gotten into his car on a rainy night and in 15 minutes completely changed the course of his life. The answer was obvious. "Yes," he said, his voice steady for the first time in years. "I accept." 18 months had passed since that fateful ride. Rafael stood at the edge of a large lot on the outskirts of the city, wearing a safety helmet and a reflective vest over a dress shirt. Beside him, Helena watched with evident satisfaction the intense movement of workers and machinery. "When did you first imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the construction site in front of them. "In college," Rafael replied, a serene smile on his face. But never on this scale. Ahead of them rose the first housing complex of the Murata project, 120 residential units designed with the sustainability principles that Rafael had conceived years before, now enhanced with modern technologies and implemented with adequate resources. The houses, in different stages of construction, followed an innovative design that maximized energy efficiency and thermal comfort while minimizing costs. Solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, low-impact local materials, integrated community spaces, every element had been carefully considered to create not just housing, but a truly sustainable community. "The first group of families will receive their keys in 6 weeks," Rafael commented, consulting his tablet. "We're on schedule and under budget." Helena nodded, satisfied. "And the other 5 projects?" "Campinas and Recife have already started construction. Salvador, Belém, and Porto Alegre will start next quarter. We're adapting the projects to the climate and cultural conditions of each region, as planned." An assistant engineer approached, asking for guidance on a technical issue. Rafael answered with confidence and clarity, demonstrating complete mastery of the project. Helena watched the interaction with silent approval. When the assistant walked away, Rafael turned his attention to the view ahead. It still felt surreal at times, seeing his ideas coming to fruition, taking concrete form, about to become real homes for real people. "Do you know what impresses me most about you, Rafael?" Helena broke the contemplative silence. "What?" "How you never forgot where you came from," she replied. "Many professionals, after a rise like yours, would try to erase the past. They would treat their years as a driver as a shameful period that should be forgotten." Rafael considered her words for a moment. It was true. Far from hiding his recent past, he had incorporated the lessons of that period into every aspect of the Murata project. The community meetings with future residents, the detailed surveys of families' real needs, the insistence on hearing life stories before finalizing projects, all of this came directly from his experience driving people around the city, listening to their conversations, observing their realities. "Those 4 years taught me more about what people really need than all my academic training," he mused. "It would be foolish to waste those lessons." A group of visitors approached, representatives of an international fund interested in expanding the project to other Latin American countries. Rafael adjusted his posture, preparing for yet another presentation of the Murata project. Before the group arrived, Helena lightly touched his arm. "Have you ever wondered what would have happened if I had taken a different car that night?" Rafael smiled. "Or if I had decided to end my day earlier?" "Exactly," Helena nodded. "So many little coincidences had to line up perfectly for us to meet." "I prefer not to think of it as a coincidence," Rafael replied, looking at the project that had become his professional and personal redemption. "I like to think that, in some way, this was where we both needed to be at that moment." Helena smiled, nodding in agreement as the group of investors approached. "Our guests have arrived. Let's show them the future of sustainable housing." Rafael nodded, stepping forward to greet the visitors with the quiet confidence of someone who has finally found their true path. As they walked through the construction site, explaining every innovative detail of the project, a ride-hailing car slowly drove down the adjacent street. For a moment, Rafael's eyes followed the vehicle, a silent connection to the past that, however difficult it had been, had paved the way for him to get here. That 15-minute drive, 18 months. Ego hadn't just changed his career, it had completely redefined his understanding of purpose, failure, and starting over. 6 months later, the Murata project was in full swing. The first housing complex had been delivered to the selected families, and the other 5 projects were progressing according to schedule. The Nova Terra Foundation organized an event to celebrate the initial success and announce the expansion of the program to 3 more cities. The event took place in the completed housing complex itself, a symbolic decision by Rafael, who insisted that investors, journalists, and authorities should see the project working in practice with its true protagonists, the families who now lived in those houses. On a small improvised stage in the central community area, Helena concluded her speech to an attentive audience. And so I am pleased to announce that the board of the Nova Terra Foundation has unanimously approved the expansion of the Murata project to 3 more cities, with an additional investment of $45 million over the next 3 years. Enthusiastic applause filled the room. Rafael, sitting in the front row, smiled quietly. The project that had begun as a dream at university, abandoned out of necessity and resurrected by a ride-hailing app, had now become a national initiative, with the potential to transform thousands of lives. And now, Helena continued, I would like to call to the stage the man without whom none of this would be possible, the visionary behind the Murata project and living proof that second chances can change the world, Rafael Soares. More applause as Rafael took the stage, wearing a simple but elegant suit. A far cry from the worn-out clothes of his days as a driver, he thanked Helena with a brief hug before taking the microphone. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his voice calm and confident, especially to the families who allowed us to come into their lives and build not just homes, but a new concept of community. He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Officials, investors, journalists, but most of all the families who now called the Murata project home. Many of you have heard the story of how this project began, how a 15-minute conversation in a ride-hailing car changed my life. It's a story I like to share, not because it puts me in the spotlight, but because it perfectly illustrates what the Murata project stands for. The idea that profound transformations can begin in the most unexpected places, at the most unlikely times. Rafael paused, his eyes briefly meeting Helena's in the front row. But there's a part of this story that I rarely tell, and that I'd like to share today. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage for the revelation he was about to make. The night I met Helena, I had decided that this would be my last week as a ride-sharing driver. Not because I had found another job. In fact, I was about to give up completely. A watchful silence fell over the audience. After 4 years of rejections, after sending out hundreds of resumes with no response, after seeing my savings depleted and my dreams seeming ever more distant, I had decided to leave the city, too, return to the small town in the countryside where I grew up, and accept a job at the local city hall that a childhood friend had gotten me. It wasn't engineering. It wasn't anything close to what I'd dreamed of, but it was a steady job. Rafael paused, remembering those dark days. That race with Helena happened on Thursday. The following Monday, I would hand over the keys to the rented room and leave. My bus ticket was already purchased. Surprised murmurs ran through the audience. Helena, in the front row, seemed genuinely impacted by the revelation. I was only 4 days away from never knowing about the Nova Terra Foundation, from never working on the Murata project, from never seeing these houses become a reality, Rafael continued, gesturing to the surrounding housing complex. I was only 4 days away from giving up completely. He paused again, letting the weight of that revelation sink in. I tell this today not to dramatize my personal story, but because I believe there is a profound lesson here for all of us. How many talented people, how many transformative projects, how many revolutionary ideas are we losing every day because someone is 4 days away from giving up? How many app drivers, delivery people, waiters, informal workers out there have the potential to change the world, if only they had the opportunity I had? The audience was completely silent now, caught up in the intensity of his words. Projeto Morada is not just about building sustainable homes. It is about building a system where talents are not wasted, where potential is not ignored, where second chances do not depend on unlikely coincidences on rainy nights. Rafael looked directly at the families sitting together, some with children in their arms. And that's why I'm proud to announce today, in partnership with Fundação Nova Terra, the creation of the Recomeço program, an initiative that will identify and support talented professionals who, like me, were forced to abandon their careers due to circumstances beyond their control. Spontaneous applause broke out before I could even continue. Helena, in the front row, had tears in her eyes as she applauded. The program will offer scholarships, professional development, mentoring, and employment opportunities to people who demonstrate talent and passion, but who face structural barriers to realizing their potential. We will start with engineers, architects, and construction technicians, but we intend to expand to other areas soon. More applause, even more enthusiastic. Because true sustainability isn't just about the materials we use or the energy we save, it's about how we value and cultivate human potential, our most precious and renewable resource. Rafael concluded his speech to warm applause. As he stepped off the stage, he was greeted by Helena, who gave him a warm hug. "You didn't tell me about the Recomeço program," she said, genuinely surprised. Rafael smiled. "I wanted it to be a surprise. The idea came to me after visiting one of our construction sites and discovering that one of the bricklayers has a degree in environmental engineering but has never managed to work in the field." Helena nodded, understanding immediately. "How many talents we are wasting every day?" "Exactly. And now we have the chance to change that." As they walked around the event, receiving congratulations and sharing details about the next steps of the Morada project, Rafael noticed a young man in a corner, watching everything with a curious expression. He was wearing the uniform of a ride-hailing company. Briefly excusing himself from a conversation, Rafael approached the driver. "Hi, did you bring anyone to the event?" he asked amiably. The young man, apparently surprised to be approached by the main speaker, stammered slightly. Yes, sir. I brought a journalist, but she said I could wait and watch the event if I wanted." Rafael smiled. "What's your name?" "Miguel, sir." "Miguel, nice to meet you. I'm Rafael." He extended his hand, which the young man shook with obvious surprise. "And you don't have to call me sir. Until recently, I was exactly where you are now." Miguel's eyes widened in recognition. "Are you the guy in the story? The driver who became the project coordinator?" Rafael laughed. "That's right. How long have you been driving for the app?" 2 years. I'm saving up money to finish my degree in environmental engineering." Rafael felt a shiver run down his spine. Coincidences were sometimes frightening. "Environmental engineering? Seriously?" Miguel nodded, his face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "I've always wanted to work in sustainability, but I had to put my degree on hold when my father got sick. Now I'm trying to get back into it, but it's hard to reconcile with the hours on the app." Rafael smiled, feeling like the universe was sending him a clear message. "Miguel, I think you should know about the Recomeço program. In fact," he took a card from his pocket and wrote his personal number on the back. "Call me on Monday. I think we have a lot to talk about." The young man took the card with an incredulous expression. "Really? Thank you." Rafael squeezed his shoulder gently. Sometimes, all we need is someone who sees our potential when we ourselves have already begun to doubt it. As he walked away to return to the event, Rafael felt a profound sense of closure. In some way, by reaching out to Miguel, he was paying the invisible debt he owed to Helena and to the universe that had aligned their paths that rainy night. A 15-minute run had changed his life, and now he had the opportunity to do the same for others. Life rarely follows the plans we make for it. Sometimes it takes us on unexpected paths, seemingly meaningless detours that take us away from our original goals. Rafael Soares spent 4 years believing that he had failed, that his potential was being wasted, that his dreams had been permanently postponed. What he didn't realize was that every race, every conversation, every observation of the city through the windshield of his car was, in fact, preparing him for an opportunity he could never have imagined. His journey as a driver, far from being a detour, was an essential part of his formation as the professional who could, finally, turn his dream into reality. And it all started with 15 minutes. 15 minutes that changed not only Rafael's destiny, but now, through the Murata Project and the Recomeso program, are changing the lives of thousands of people. Never underestimate the power of a brief encounter, a seemingly casual conversation, an unexpected opportunity. Sometimes the most transformative moments in our lives come disguised as ordinary events on ordinary days when we least expect them. The next time you get into a ride-hailing car, look at the driver. Maybe there is more to that person than their current role suggests. Maybe, like Rafael, they are someone with untapped potential, with dreams put on hold, with talents waiting for an opportunity. Because in the end, we are all just 15 minutes away from a conversation that can change everything.